Yo, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the Comedy Coach podcast. It is Sunday. That means it's the time of the week where I sit in front of this microphone and talk to you about what's going on in my comedy career and how it could benefit you. Now, in this case, it's something I've been working on over the years. And as I go out for walks, as I take a shower, as I eat something, I always think about what I'm going to talk about or write about next about comedy or something to make fun of or something that can amuse me or allow me to pass the time in a more fun way. And I'm going to share it with you here. I kind of basically discovered my own comedy system. And this took a lot of trial and error. I made a lot of mistakes, let me tell you, trying to figure out how to come up with not only what to say, but how to say it on stage, and then creating content and getting feedback and seeing how the audience reacts. It's a lot of moving parts as a comedian. If you really take it seriously and you treat the creative process in a professional way, you got to approach it where you're consistently creating the funny. I mean, obviously, how else are you going to be a comedian if you're not putting the funny out there? I mean, somebody living in a cave can call themselves a comedian, but if they're not putting anything out there, that's just one audience member calling themselves that. But over the years, I've realized that if you were to look at every single part of being a comedian as its own thing or problem or solution you've got to figure out, you're going to be overwhelmed. But at the same time, you don't want to be thinking, I wish I can just have a funny thought and it posts online, or I just walk on stage, say it and it's funny, or I could just write a book about it or a script about it. Because that kind of ruins the fun at the same time. So then now you've got this dichotomy of like, all right, is it going to be very difficult or is it going to be too easy? Now, most of the time, one obstacle by itself will prevent you to get started, or if you look at a blank screen for too long, you kind of just say F it and you don't write anything. And so these obstacles, they exist and they can either make or break you as a comedian, especially when it comes to creating the content or the funny stuff. So what makes it satisfactory is you actually doing the work and putting stuff out there that is actually pretty funny or hilarious. I mean, depending on what you put out there. But not everything can be gems. So you got to do the creative process in order for the comedy writing to come out, for you to crush it on stage, for you to put that piece of content out there that gets a bunch of likes and views and ha-has in the comments. And so the process is where the voice becomes developed. It's kind of like where you feel fulfilled as you see yourself getting better and better. And so in this podcast, we're going to discuss the thing that is a comedy system, or something that I've discovered for myself when I've realized that if I just do one thing, I can handle a bunch of other things just because I did that one thing. And in this case, we'll go with what's necessary as a comedian, which is comedy writing, performing, and creating content. Now, of course, this is a very basic and simplistic approach, but I think every comedian would agree with me that these are kind of like the cornerstones for a modern day comedian to not only find the funny, get their stage time, and build an audience. So in my comedy career, if I were to say to myself, I got to sit down and I've got to write some comedy, and then the next day I say to myself, all right, I got to sign up to an open mic and try out what I wrote, and I bring a piece of paper on stage, and then the next day after that, I say to myself, well, now I got to create some content to build an audience. If I were to approach these in three separate ways, three separate problems, I can be overwhelmed and or burnt out, and I kind of feel like my inspiration will drain because I only have so much willpower. But what's interesting about willpower is that if you're inspired enough, you kind of raise the capacity for it to happen. You kind of feel good about tackling one thing instead of doing one thing and then worrying about two or three other things. And what's interesting about comedy systems is, I've been working with AI lately. I just mentioned not too long ago that I started, well, I've kind of almost finished it already, comedycalendar.com. I've been vibe coding this thing for a long time, but when I look at the systems behind that project, there was a lot of thinking involved in, like, if I do this, will this happen? If I do that, will that happen? And when I look at the way I write comedy now, it's almost very similar, but instead of just like algorithms, I just find a way to hack my willpower or my inspiration or my motivation or just overall my energy to kind of get it done, right? And when you have a system in place, what it does is it streamlines it because you know one thing will cause a domino effect for the next thing. And if I didn't find this system for myself, I wouldn't be able to create so much content or be able to find my voice the way I do on stage now that I've been riffing and writing on stage. And, that's the most coveted experience to have when you don't necessarily got to go off something that you wrote word for word, but rather just have a conversation with the audience and then they go along for the ride. I've always watched stand-up comedians do that, and I've always wanted to do that. And now that I kind of see myself doing that, it feels pretty good. But what helped me get there was realizing that I need to have the enthusiasm to do the writing and do the creative process, and rather than it feeling like a drag, you kind of feel like you want to do the next thing after you do one thing. And if you're not a comedian, let's say you don't go on stage or you don't necessarily create comedy content, but you want to be funny in conversation, this is kind of how you can develop your voice in your own private time, whether it's journaling or if you find yourself like in a similar situation and when you go on a date or when you hang out with friends, you can also treat that as the writing or the creative process whenever you do these conversations. So whether you're doing stand-up comedy or you're creating skits online or you're just someone trying to be naturally funny, just see this as a way of how a workflow works in order for you to get that creativity going when it comes to making the people laugh. And remember, the most important thing that we're developing here is that lens, that perspective, that ability for you to see the outside world and then turning that into the funny stuff in your own voice. So keep that in mind, that the core thing that we're going to do talking about comedy systems at its essence is how do you develop this quote unquote comedy voice in whatever comedy endeavor you're pursuing. So to avoid in sounding like the hustle culture, like you got to wake up at 5 a.m. and you got to write that comedy, bro. Like I don't want to sound like that, but you do have to understand how habits work and how that allows you to be productive. And if you were to follow one person's habits, it wouldn't really be appropriate for you and your lifestyle and what your private life is like. But you've got to have certain habits in place in order for you to kind of get the foundation going so that you can bring in whatever result you're going for. Because if you don't have the habits in place, you're only going to be trying to operate off chaos. You have to make the scheduling, you have to have the discipline, and you got to have the energy and the focus to make these results come to life. And in order to do that, you have to ask yourself, what is the result that you're actually going for? And in this case, what is it that you want as a comedian? Do you want to make sure that you've got a podcast out weekly? Do you want to create a comedy skit online? Do you want to hit the stage 3 times a week? And every single one of these has a particular step you have to take in order for you to fulfill it. But then taking that step alone isn't sufficient for you to get those results. You have to be consistent, and you also have to make sure that you're always getting closer and closer to whatever outcome you're going for. So once you've got the result in mind, the next thing you want to do is you want to figure out what's the obstacle that's stopping you from getting that particular results or to implement that habit. And you're going to have to make best friends with whatever that obstacle is, aka the problem that's preventing you from doing it. So let's say if you want to go up 3 times a week, but the scheduling at your job is different every week. The problem here is scheduling. However, if you were to say, if I wanted to go up 3 times a week, is there an open mic that isn't just for comedy? Is there a showcase that you've got a relationship with the host that can hook you up, once a month, and you add that into the mix? You've got to be creative in order to customize it based on whatever your life situation or circumstances are. But the most important thing is you've got to plan it, right? And so in order to get the result, you have to put the time, the focus, and the energy behind making sure you hit the stage 3 times. Now, this is, of course, just a simple, basic example. And if you were to see it as, oh, this is something I can't solve, and you don't even get started, well, time goes by, and then there's going to come a point where you wished you did get started when you had the initial idea. So do consider the importance of habits and you actually fulfilling them in order for you to get the long-term benefits of what we're going to discuss here when it comes to comedy systems. And what's great about consistency is that eventually the friction, the obstacle, the problem becomes the part that you look forward to the most. Why? Because it becomes a challenge that you enjoy. It's no longer a drag. It's something that you can't wait to tackle again. Like, oh, okay, I work a double today. Let me see if I can find a late night open mic, or let me show up late and perform in front of two people on this mic. Stuff like that kind of excites you. At least it did for me. Whenever I would have to drive from work 3 hours in order to get 5 minutes at a poetry open mic, pretend that I'm doing poetry, and then I hit them with the dirty jokes right at the end. Stuff like that. You can make it into a game for yourself and amuse yourself in the process. But once you start doing things consistently, the problem becomes something you enjoy, and then you kind of get out of this gravitational pull, and you kind of start like free flowing into the things that prevent you from doing it. And you're like, oh no, I'm actually doing it. And then you realize it wasn't really that big of a problem. You kind of just saw the inconvenience of it and was like, nah, I don't want to do it. So then once you get to that point, you then add another thing. And then I think they say it takes like 30 days, but you could probably do it earlier. Maybe like a week in or 2 weeks in, you probably start feeling this way. All right, so here's the most important part. Once you got like 2 or 3 of these things going, where you've got the consistency, you don't feel them to be as difficult as it used to be when you first got started, and you're actually enjoying the process because of the challenge it gives you, you then want to start finding out, like, how can you stack these things up at the same time? So, for example, in the one that we were discussing where you got to go up on stage 3 times, if you want to create comedy content, you can record yourself, do these sets, and then post it online. Now you're going to see another problem and think, well, what if I'm performing and there's not a lot of audience members for it to sound like a big laugh track? Off the top of my head, I can think, well, you do like some sort of narration. Like, all right, here's my thought process while I was saying this joke. Let me tell you the story, how I came up with this joke. And then you creatively start finding ways in order to solve the problem. And then you can turn, let's say if you did like 3 clips of those a week, you can turn all 3 of them together into one podcast episode. Now you've got the performance, now you've got the content, and you've got the ability to write, whether it be through the narration or on stage. So this is a comedy system that I just came up, off the top of my head as an example to show you on how these comedy systems can work synergistically for you to achieve the result that you're going for. You find the problem, you realize that the problem is actually the opportunity, and then you stack up the problems all together by doing the one thing, which is making the schedule to do the performance 3 times a week. Now, to further elaborate, let me show you an example of what I've developed as a system for myself over the last few years. So when COVID happened in 2020, I wasn't able to produce shows here in Miami, and I was stuck at home in my garage. And I just set up a live stream, and I went on live every single day. And even though no one would watch, like you go live, you see like 1, and then it goes away, and then 1, and then it goes away. And then, someone would see that and feel discouraged, like, oh, I'm not really talking to anybody. But I kind of just saw it as like, well, there's a camera facing me. Someone's going to walk in or tune in for 30 seconds and then tune back out. So let me just enjoy the process of just talking to a camera, and then keep in mind that somebody might be watching. So I wouldn't even look at the number. I would just look at the camera and just talk, and I would riff, and I would talk about what's happening in the news or what's trending or whatever. And I would do this every single day. And I think after like a few months, 3 or 4 or 5 months, I started getting some viewership. Some, like 20 people would tune in, and there was even an article written for me about how a comedian is doing live streams to pass the time while we were in lockdown or whatever. And it was all because I just didn't stop on the inconvenience of realizing that no one was watching my live stream. So that carried over, and I just started doing the live stream now once a week, now that I'm back in production and I got a life. And I use that as the opportunity to kind of write on trending topics or whatever the city of Miami is talking about. I'm hyper local here, so I create content off my city. And I just riff off of it. And I try to find different angles and different ways of discussing whatever the topic at hand is. And then I structure it into like one-liners and newsletters and comedy skits. And then I go on stage, and then I unstructure it again, where instead of just having like things that I would just say that I've pre-written, I try to remember the things that I spoke about and then say it brand new again on stage based on the audience and how they're reacting. And so it becomes this whole feedback loop of content, writing, and performing. And I've been doing it for a few years now, and I've got to admit, my voice has developed. Like I said earlier, like I'm able to like write on stage, do a lot of crowd work, come up with some new stuff, say some old stuff. Like depending on how I'm feeling, the context, the situations that I'm in, stuff just comes out because of this comedy creative system that I've discovered for myself in 2020. And with that, let's get started with the AI emails. I get the transcript of what I just said, told AI to send me 3 emails based off of this topic, and let's see what it wrote to me. Email 1, subject: I think my best pitches happen when I'm not trying. Hey Manny, I sell real estate down in Kendall. I'm not a comedian, but I started listening to your podcast because a friend sent me the link, and I just loved this topic. I always freeze up whenever I try to go off script and talk about properties, especially on tour videos for Instagram. The second I start writing the script, I sound like every other agent and it comes off stiff and robotic. But my best pitches, they're the ones where I have a great day in the morning and then I kind of just have fun while I say them. They always happen when I'm driving clients around, shooting the breeze. We're talking about the neighborhood, weird HOA rules, the history of the building, where to get a good cafecito nearby. That's when I feel like myself and people actually relax. Hearing you talk about going from raw to structured to raw again really clicked for me. I started leaving voice notes on my phone right after the showings, just talking the way I talk in the car, and then using those as the base for my video scripts and captions. For the first time, it actually sounds like me, not some real estate template. My question is, when you go unstructured on stage and just talk from memory, do you ever completely lose your place? And when that happens, how do you recover without panicking or killing the moment? Thanks for what you're doing. I appreciate it. All right. Here's the thing. First of all, it really depends on your style. There's people that can read a script and actually crush it. And they've got it in their voice, they've got it in their tonality, they've got it in their facial expressions. So don't think that if you write a script and you read it aloud, it's not good content. You just have to work on how you can deliver the structured notes in a more, I guess, natural way. I mean, just think about like all these TV personalities that, you know, what comes to mind, that guy, Robert Stack from Unsolved Mysteries. Like that guy is obviously reading a teleprompter with his coat on, but it's still like he still draws you in when he talks about these mysteries or whatever. So just keep that in mind. Like teleprompters and writing scripts isn't necessarily a bad thing. But if you prefer to just go off the cuff and riff and just go on all natural, that's also, it's just as good. You know, you could do it in your own way and have fun with it. And when you were mentioning this, if you ever feel like you lose your place or like you kind of like, you forget where to go, or you don't know where to go next, or you forgot what direction you were going in or whatever, just use that into your advantage. Be like, oh wait, hold on, I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about again? The pool, right? Did I mention the pool? Just have fun with it. So even if you have like a flub going off the top, just go with it. That's the beautiful part of being spontaneous, that you can go from one thing to the next. It's not like you have talking points or anything like that. Unless, of course, they ask for a specific thing and then you talk about something else. You don't want to do that. That's not good sales. But one thing that comes to mind as I'm reading this email is you can also ask the people when you give them the tour, like, you know, in your car or something, hey, can I record our interaction so I can kind of just see like what you're looking for in a home, and I can kind of give you the responses, and then we can make it like playful or fun or whatever. And if they say okay, you can then create content off of that, where like you're driving them around the neighborhood and you're just like shooting the breeze, as you say, with them. That could be good content. Or maybe like you can like set up a camera somewhere, or hold up what do they call those things with the selfie sticks, and you're recording the interaction with the person. There's a lot of personalities out there that would love to create content along with you. So just keep that in mind. 2 birds with 1 stone. 3, actually, if you consider raising up your sales skills by creating content and going off the cuff. Email number 2. Hey Manny, I'm a mom of 2 in Orlando, and I work part-time, so most of my day is reacting to other people's needs and schedules. I don't really get those long, quiet stretches where I can sit down and be creative the way people on the internet always talk about. Are you implying me? Most of what I come up with shows up in tiny pieces. a weird thought while I'm driving, a funny observation while I'm cleaning the kitchen, a line that pops into my head while there's a cartoon blaring in the background and somebody's asking me for a snack. Well, I mean, you wrote down the idea for the email. That's a good start. I've started to realize that creativity for me probably isn't going to look like a perfect studio setup. Okay, so this is about me. Candles lit. Every once in a while, yeah, a little incense or something. 3 hours of silence is probably always going to be a little messy and interrupted. But then I catch myself wondering if that means I'm not serious enough about it. Like real creative people carve out whole days and I'm just collecting random scraps. How do you build something real when your life only gives you pieces? Appreciate you, Marissa. Hey, so first of all, what's more important here? You got to take care of those kids. You're a mom. Those kids got to be well taken care of, but you can include your life as a mom in the comedy. So for example, you know, that part you said where, you know, asking you for a snack, that's pretty funny. And you can include the kids in the joke. You talk to your kid. I mean, if they're old enough to understand what you're saying, you can talk to them about like something that you've observed. Of course, you know, it's got to be clean, right? Squeaky clean. But incorporate it into your daily life, because just because you have the thought and you're doing something doesn't mean it can't contribute to the thing you're doing. So let's say if you're cleaning the kitchen, you know, you're mopping and stuff and you got a funny idea, you can put like one of those magnet things on your fridge where you can like write, instead of like a grocery list, you write the bit while you're cleaning or doing the dishes or whatever. Or like if your kid said something funny, you can then start riffing with your kid about the funny thing that they said. So just all you're doing is incorporating or including it into your life as a mother rather than seeing it as two separate things. So this is what I mean by like a system where you see the interactions you have with your kids or you see the thoughts that you have while you're cleaning as part of the writing process. Email number 3. I'm not trying to make it, but I do want to make something. Hi, Manny. I'm 62, recently retired, living up in Asheville. Very clean neighborhood, by the way. I've been there. For most of my life, I did the practical things, steady job, family, bills, all of that. It wasn't a bad life, just very organized around responsibilities. The funny part of me mostly lived at dinner tables and family gatherings. I was the guy telling stories, doing little impressions, finding the weird angle in normal situations. People would say, you should have done something with this. You should have done something online or on stage, which is a compliment that somehow feels good and annoying at the same time. Now, I actually have the time. I keep thinking about trying something creative, maybe writing these things down, maybe recording them somehow. The problem is I've spent decades being the person who needs a clear reason and a clear structure before starting anything. If I don't know what shape it's supposed to take, a book, a show, a blog, whatever, I end up doing nothing. I just stay in my head with it. I'm not trying to make it or become famous at 62. I just don't want to leave this world without having made something honest with this side of myself. How do you start creatively when the goal isn't ambition, it's curiosity? Thanks for doing this podcast, Leonard. All right, Leonard. Well, Leonard, it sounds like you have the most fun whenever you're at, as you say, dinner tables and family gatherings. So if you're sitting down, enjoying a meal, and you're hanging out with some family members that you can have fun and you know, talk your shit with and say the funny things, I guess that's the best scenario for you to do your process, whatever that may be. So let's say if you were to ask your family members, hey, can we do this again on Sunday? And we just set up some mics and a charcuterie board and a bottle of our favorite wine and just record an hour of what we're doing. When it comes to building systems, that's also what I've realized. Like, what is it that you're already doing where you can implement the thing so that's not bothersome or it takes a lot of willpower to do it? Like, you already do it anyway. All you got to do is just recreate it or capture it. So in your case, look into having the dinner tables and family gatherings as part of the creative process for yourself. And if you really think about it, you can also create some great memories with your family members if you record these and they can go back. You know, you're 62, not implying anything, but, you know, if they want to remember you, they can always listen to the podcast and live all those funny memories all over again. All right, Leonard, there you have it. You see how many ways people can build a comedy system, whether it be where the problem is, what the result is. You just include it in whatever it is you're doing, and then you see how that one thing can be a win-win for all the other things. So I really hope this podcast helped you understand the importance of comedy systems and how it can be applied to just about any situation if you want to learn how to use your sense of humor and create content and go on stage and use it in conversations, etc. If this is something that you would like to handle and you want some comedy coaching, that's exactly what I do. Reach out to me. Visit mannygaravito.com. Thank you very much for tuning into this episode, and I'll see you on the next one.